Hi, everybody. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci of CFL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download the app, make sure you rate, leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Joining me as usual is David Morassutti, and we have a special guest with us tonight, Marcus Aurelius Nielsen. For those of you that love the CFL, you must have at one point or another bumped into one of the love letters to the Canadian Football League that Marcus has written. Marcus, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Our pleasure. David, as usual, you go to practice. You know Marcus better than I do because you run into him there. You guys both have fun going to the practices. Unfortunately, where I live, it precludes me being able to go there. A 2-hour drive to practice is not as attractive as the 15-minute drive I used to have. Well, first of all, let's talk about the season for the Toronto Argonauts. Marcus, you follow them very passionately, and we all appreciate your passion for the Argos and appreciate your passion for the Canadian Football League. It's something that we don't have a lot of in this community, so it's great to have you here talking about it. So let's start talking about when the season started, when practice started, and I'll start with you, David. What do you think were the prospects of the Toronto Argonauts, knowing full well they lost to the Ticats in the Eastern semifinal the year before?
I think it's a team that realized what exactly they needed to do to win the game, which was not lose it by shooting themselves in the foot, needing to make the plays that they need to make, and yeah, they followed all their whole game plan to a T pretty much. A lot of the players on that team said that last year was a big lesson for the group, but on top of that, there was the guys that they brought in, the veterans they brought in to kind of elevate the group a little bit. I look at Brandon Banks, right? He went through all of his struggles throughout the year, and in this game, he didn't have the biggest impact out of all the players on the team, but he made the subtle plays when he needed to, when he was called upon, and those are things the Argos struggled to get last year, and I think that was the biggest difference between what we saw on Sunday and last year against Hamilton.
Marcus, you go cover the Toronto Argonauts. You're well aware of the players that they picked up because they were, when the Argos played, Harris was a problem for them to deal with. When the Argos played Hamilton, Banks was a problem that they had to deal with. Jagarrett Davis, same thing when they went to Hamilton. He was a problem they had to deal with. When you first started going to practice and you seeing these guys, how impactful did you think they were going to be?
I thought they were going to be not just impactful on the field, but just off the field with the presence, what they bring to the locker room. I don't think people understand what veterans bring to a team. And what we saw yesterday was that team was sharp and ready from the get-go. Last year, their first 2 drives, they got to the 3-yard line. They couldn't punch it in. There was no mistaking it yesterday. It was 21 points off the bat. Montreal didn't know what hit them. Montreal played a great game. They almost came back, but Toronto just made it their game by attacking, and that's a veteran presence. And when you see a Brandon Banks make that catch off his foot, you see him negating a single, which you'll say give up the single, it's not big. Brandon Banks took that ball. It was a 35-yard gain, but he must have ran 50 yards. It's impressive to see. You got a guy like Jagarrett Davis, 6 Grey Cup in a row. That is just unbelievable. The thing that he's going to be itching for, he's only won 1 of those 5 he's been in. So he's due for another. But then you can't forget guys like Deshaun Amos. He's a veteran. A guy like Wynton McManus, another veteran. Pinball, Vince Magri, the whole organization focused after last year on getting veterans to come into the team. The way Andrew Harris came out earlier in the week, said, I'm complimenting AJ Ouellette. That was absolutely what you wanted to see. Andrew Harris is a Hall of Famer, one of the best running backs we've seen, and he did not take the spotlight. He made sure that AJ was a guy, and he was just there to compliment him. And you saw that 2-headed monster. And if it's going to be minus 15 next week, I think Winnipeg's going to be in for a rude awakening watching those 2 guys because the running game is going to have a big impact.
Yeah, I agree with both of you in regards to veteran experience of what it means. It basically means that there aren't or are less surprises. So there's always a surprise, but there's less surprises. They deal with issues that come up. They have a full menu of experiences that they can draw from. So that's the important thing about having veterans. But I think the other thing is it's not just about having veterans, guys. It's also about having the right veterans. And do you know before they come in, either at training camp during the season, that they're the right veterans? Right? They were very fortunate. They made some very good choices, especially guys when you consider Brandon Banks was going through a tough period in his life the last couple of years in Hamilton. So they were bringing in a guy that Pinball Clemens wrapped his arms around and said, I'm going to bring you into this team and we're going to make you feel at home here. Brandon Banks said it, as you remember, David, from the first interview he did, for Toronto. He talked about that clearly.
Yeah, being, not putting it all on his shoulders too. I think that was the important thing, right? None of the players they brought in were expected to go above and beyond what they were capable of. And that's what makes a veteran's job easy. They can do what they need to do, and the team's going to be successful because of it. I mean, Marcus, you brought up Win McManus. He left the game, and sure, his impact leaving the game, you saw it. There was an absence there, but the team picked up behind him because that's also the strength of this Argos team is that they've lost guys throughout the year. They lost Andrew Harris. They lost Win McManus. They've been through all of these injuries, and yet the players were always ready to step up because the team understood that you can't put it all on the shoulders of one player to get there. And I think that's what allowed this Argos team to go as far as they have, is because it's not just on one player. Yes, Cloud Bethel Thompson being the quarterback, a lot of the success and failure will be on his shoulders. But he had so much support that I think he didn't really have last year. Uh, and that's what made this team just very better prepared for the playoff grind that we saw. And it was not easy by no means, and it's not going to get any easier. But I think this team is definitely battle tested, both mentally and physically on the field for whatever they get thrown at them.
Go ahead, Marcus.
Yeah, to be honest, and you bring up Brandon Banks and his struggles, and we all go back to that moment earlier this year when they were playing Winnipeg. There was this thing on the sidelines where guys are getting at each other, and we saw Pinball come down. And this is a joke around. You never see Pinball angry. He always has a smile on his face. He had the beard at the time, that gray beard. He came down. He was angry, and everyone knew it. And it was like that guy you don't want to disappoint. And you've seen that from the whole, and you can see Brandon Banks how much he respects Pinball, because that whole situation just went calm. And they basically came back in that game and they almost won it. And that's how you can see a veteran knows and understands. We are here to win something. We're not here for my own needs, for what I need to do. I'm going to be a part of something bigger. And I think we've seen these guys buy in. There's guys that fly under the radar, like a Markeith Ambles. He's been a consistent receiver all season. He's another veteran they brought in. They're going for broke right now because this lineup is going to be a lot different in 2023 than it is now. They brought in a lot of veterans. Pinball said that. We brought in the veterans because we feel we're ready for that next step. So whatever happens on Sunday, we don't know. But I think Toronto is going there expecting to win that game. And I think Winnipeg is very confident right now, as they should be. They've only lost 5 games in the last 2 years. But Toronto is going to put up a fight, and I think it's going to be a lot closer in what people across the country are thinking.
Collaros has never lost a playoff game for Winnipeg.
For Winnipeg.
That's a trend that needs to be terminated for sure. I find one of the ironies that I find with this Grey Cup back in 2012, Ricky Ray was the starting quarterback. Zach Collaros and Trevor Harris were the backup quarterbacks, 2 quarterbacks that the Argos will need to beat to make it to the Grey Cup. And then in 2017, Ricky Ray was a quarterback again when the next time that the Argos won the Grey Cup. And who was the backup quarterback? McLeod, Bethel, Thompson. So there's a lot of fate, it seems, being written in this Grey Cup. And then the final one that I love is the one where if BC had a won, it would have been really interesting because it would have been BC and Toronto won the Grey Cup at home,
Mhm.
and so did Saskatchewan, and this game would have been in Saskatchewan. So that one went out the window. So I was just kind of hoping that one because that would have been a real nice one to talk about. But when you talk about Ambles and you talk about players like Ambles, when you talk about players on this team, the Argos brought people in. The veterans they brought could lead. Like for example, with Harris, you can't tell me he didn't help Willette. With Ambles, you can't tell me that Banks didn't help him, and you can't tell me that Jagarrett Davis didn't help that defensive line.
Yeah.
Oakman, a guy like Oakman, like this is what happens when you build a team, right? When you're building towards a winner. And finally, what I wanted to say in this little part here is about those fights that you talked about. They weren't fights between each other. They were fights about getting to where they all wanted to be. That was the difference. Like we saw what happened in Saskatchewan and we saw what happened in Toronto. And by the way, they were happening simultaneously. But what happened with Saskatchewan, it deteriorated into something that became negative. With the Argos, it became something positive.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And I think that goes back to the veteran presence. There's guys, a guy like Jonathan Jones who might be starting at the weak side on Sunday because I honestly think McManus tore his bicep. I don't see how he's going to play. We would all love him to play, but Jonathan Jones is learning from McManus, and that's the transference that we've seen. Like you mentioned, all the other guys mentoring, teaching. That's what we're seeing out there with this team. That fight on the sidelines against Winnipeg earlier in the year, it was a passion fight. But it was also something where Pinball had to come down and say, this is not how we run things in our organization. I feel bad for Mike a lot because Mike has so many things on the go. He can't do it all on his own. And I think he has carried such a burden for this franchise to move it forward. And he's won, 6 Grey Cups? 3 as a player, a coach, 2 as an executive. Now in another one as a GM. He has done absolutely everything for this franchise. But it's one of the reasons I write is because I want other people to be pushing this forward. I don't want it all on one person. And this one person has realized the only way you're going to get a Grey Cup here is you bring in these veterans. And we understand McLeod Bethel Thompson, his situation. I wrote an article earlier about he hit rock bottom in 2019. They lost 26-0 in Edmonton. And he didn't know if he was going to play again. He got the start next week, and they're down 20-0 quickly to Winnipeg. I don't know if you guys remember that game where they ended up coming back and win 28-27. After that Edmonton game, he was 2-10. He's 23-13 since that game. He has just taken his game to another level, and he's done it with criticism. He's done it with a quarterback like Chad Kelly coming in, who I think has been absolutely magnificent. His attitude is polar opposite than what everybody thought it was going to be. But that's another transference of hanging out with McLeod Bethel Thompson. Listen here, I'm going to show you. I've been around. This is our Argos team that is laced with such positive influence, and it all starts from the top. But there's going to be a day where Pinball needs to do other things. He can't run this franchise on his own. And that's why I say I feel bad for him, because there's a lot on his shoulders and it's not fair to the man.
No, he's carried. He didn't. I remember when, and Frank, you remember with the day
Yeah,
he took the
absolutely.
job, it was not something he wanted to do, but felt like he had to do it because of where the franchise was in that 2019 season, where it needed to be put back on course. And he said, and I will never forget these words because I think it's such an important thing to remember, is that you never want to be the smartest guy in the room. Basically, he was saying is this is not going to be just on me to get this job done. It's going to be about everybody doing it together. And I think that's where the whole team has really taken note of that mentality of they have to do it together. Enoch Mwamba, one of there's so many guys that have so many great lines when I talk to them. McLeod Bethel Thomas being one of them, but he has kind of the out of world sort of comments that sometimes it takes me a minute to figure out what exactly he's trying to say. And then Enoch Mwamba was kind of saying, like, their mantra was, if you want to go fast, you can go alone, but if you want to get far, go together. And like, it's just it screams to me somebody who's spending a lot of time with Pinball Clemens, because that's something that I would expect Pinball to say. These guys all embrace what the man at top has wanted this team to accomplish, and to do it as a collaborative effort, and not putting the, as I said, not putting the burden on one person. Pinball has had a lot thrown at him, but he has made sure that he has surrounded himself with enough, like-minded people. Jim Barker being one of them. I think a very underrated addition to the club, considering they needed somebody with that veteran
2012,
right? Somebody who's been there, done it on many levels, as on the sidelines, up in the press box. Like, he needed somebody that can help steer them and steer him, and that's I think the best part of this Argos team is there's not one person that you say can take full credit for what's happening with this team.
Let's rewind a little bit in what you said there, and I want to get back to Enoch Mwamba. We forget, I guess, 1 year makes a big difference, right? He came in a year before all these guys that we're talking about, and he came in for the same reason. It all comes down to leadership, and the kind of leadership that can win championships. And the special talent that Pinball Clemens has, and I think I'd have to say Barker as well, is that they're thinkers who think about what it takes to win, the kind of players that you need to win. And the one thing Barker has, and that mentality is always something that's I always draw on when I think about him. He's always been the guy who's been honest with players and said, look, you're a starter, but I'm already looking for the guy that's going to replace you. And if you don't have that kind of mentality, you don't build a champion. The kind of champion that Pinball Clemens, you talked about one point that he made where he wanted to be not to be the smartest guy in the room, but he also said, I don't want to build a team that wins a championships and then plays a championship and then plays terrible for 5, 6 years, 8 years. He wants a consistently good team, which brings us to why I said about Jim Barker, which is why Enoch Mwamba and other players that came just before the ones that came this year, why they're so relevant as well. This is a team laced with a lot of character. They bring in the part that amazes me more than anything. I'll start this point with you guys. Coaching. The Toronto Argonauts bring in Corey Mace, no experience as a defensive coordinator, right? What has he done with this team? It's amazing. Dinwiddie comes onto this team while many of us wonder, how the heck are they winning all these games under Dinwiddie? Because we question some of the decisions that he makes. But guess what? They keep winning. I don't know about you guys, but it amazes me. The reason I asked the question about training camp is that it amazes me because it seems every time we turn around, when doubt could be at its strongest about the Toronto Argonauts, they bounce with a victory. They win when they're not supposed to win. They make silly mistakes and still overcome them to win. How do you guys feel about the team in that part of the game, the coaching? Go ahead, Marcus. Okay,
Marcus. No,
Marcus, you go first.
You know what? I think this is the hard part about football that we have a hard time grasping, because we've seen Dinwiddie slip. We've seen timeouts called when they should have been timeout. The challenge flag, everybody knows he has a real issue with the challenge flag. But a football game is 60 minutes, and Coach Dinwiddie's plan is a 60-minute plan. So we're not seeing all the intricacies of that plan, and that's why they're winning games. We're seeing the little mistakes, and I think that's what's highlighted. Dinwiddie understands you're the sum of your whole, like the parts. You're not just one individual. He's kept two guys to deal with the secondary. Joshua Bell and William Fields, they've done an amazing job. You had a veteran like Kevin Iben controlling the linebackers. That helps Corey Mace tremendously. I cannot talk about the job Chris Sweet has done on the offensive line enough. This guy has come in to an offensive line that was in shambles. Justin Lawrence became an all-star this year. working under a guy like Chris Sweet. Having Costanza coaching the receivers, Mike Miller coaching the quarterbacks. He was with Arizona when they're in the Super Bowl, coaching Larry Fitzgerald and Anquan Bolden. They've brought Edwin Harrison to coach the running backs. He was offensive lineman, but he understands what it takes. Mickey Donovan has special teams. He's brought an energy to this team that is just on another level. And I think this is why they're getting the wins. This is why they're doing things, because they realize they're a whole unit. It's not just Coach Dinwiddie, it's everyone he's surrounded himself with. There isn't many organizations that can get 7 new coaches in the offseason and put together a season like the Argos did.
That's the part that I find amazing. And a lot of them with not specific experience in their new, and I refer to it as new position.
Yeah, Mickey Donovan was Coach of the Year in the Quebec University in 2014. He knows how to coach. They've brought guys with different experience, and I think it's showing. We see the big players, we see the big veterans who are signed, but there's so many little parts to this team that have got them to that championship game on Sunday.
David, how about you?
Yeah, no, I think Mark's brought up a great point. Is that Ryan Dinwiddie is new to this. At one point, Michael Shea was new to it. He had to learn and make the mistakes to get to where he is. Right, like, as a head coach, there's the expectation you can't be making certain mistakes, but only way you're going to learn really as a head coach is if you go through these experiences. Yes, there's still some areas he's going to have that Ryan Dinwiddie's going to have to work on, especially in a Grey Cup game. But he's there, right? Like, and he even said he even, like, they asked him yesterday what it means for him to be at the Grey Cup, and he's like, he never wants to make it about himself. But he also says that good coaches tend to say that they're overrated because they have good players, and then bad coaches who get fired or is it's never on the players or something along those lines. But he kind of knows that he knows what his role has to be to make this team successful. He's not going to overstep. Like, there's so many different parts to what make the Argos work. You can't, Ryan Dinwiddie's not going to take all the credit because he knows it's not just on him to make it all work the way it has. So I think these are important steps you need to see a coach like this make. A lot of people were, kind of raised our eyebrows when he was hired in the first place, but clearly Pinball, who has been a coach in this league, saw something in a very inexperienced coach, at least someone who's never been past a quarterback's coach. It's had a little bit of time in offensive coordinator, but to come all the way and become a head coach of a team that, frankly, was in a very tough situation because Mark Trestman had led that team to a Grey Cup. Not too long after, he's out the door. Corey Chamberlain comes in. He had experience. So then they decided we're just going to go in the total opposite direction. And there was a lot of pressure on him. He had to wait a whole year before he could even coach his first game. And I think that just speaks to, him really understanding the opportunity that was in front of him and not letting it overwhelm him. I think that's something he's sure there's times, and Frank, we've seen the emotion from him during bad times. And that's okay. You're going to have those, especially when the situation is new, but he's learning and you can't disagree with the results.
Yeah, you know what I like about Dinwiddie, and it's something that you have to kind of think about because it doesn't jump out at you right away. Now, what we've noticed about him is that look at all the quarterbacks that have come through the Toronto Argonauts under his guide, under his leadership. If a quarterback isn't for him, he doesn't put that quarterback on the vine. That quarterback ends up going. He ends up disappearing. Like if he doesn't have the right kind of faith in a quarterback, he doesn't wait long to have their faith. Him gain faith in them. We've seen some pretty good quarterbacks with pretty good pedigrees come into the Argonauts and be gone. And it's always been McLeod Bethel Thompson that's been left standing. And I guess the more we see what's going on here, it's easy to understand. But I can't imagine, guys, how hard it is to get rid of an Arbuckle, to get rid of the guys that they've gotten rid of with great reputations. He knows what he's looking for, is what I'm trying to say, and I don't know how important that is. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because even in 2019, they had Zach Collaros. There was a contract ready to be signed, but then when Jim Pop left, was let go, Zach Collaros is gone. Many said, "Oh, the Argos made a big mistake." Sure, you would like Zach Collaros on the team right now. I'm sure many would take Zach an MOP. No offense to McLeod Bethel Thompson on that one, but Ryan Dinwiddie understood that there was someone here that he felt like he could work with. The last thing a coach wants to do is have to reteach the offense to another quarterback. They really, if they got someone there that they believe in and that's already learned everything, they're going to do whatever they can to make it work with that quarterback. And that's what they did with McLeod Bethel Thompson. Many times we've heard it. Many fans have called for McLeod Bethel Thompson to be let go, and they stuck with him. And the players, Frank, we Devaris Daniels, he said he would run through a wall for his quarterback. We don't hear that too often, but the team sees it. The coaches see how the guys gravitate towards the quarterback. And that's why we've seen McLeod stick around for this long and finally be able to put together some semblance of success is because the players and the coaches and the organization had belief in him.
How do you see the quarterback carousel in Toronto, Marcus?
Well, so when people bring up Zach Collaros, I understand the frustration. Like you said, he hasn't lost a playoff game since he's left here. Zach Collaros had an offensive line in Winnipeg that kept him off the ground. They got some great offensive linemen they've had. That's how you win Grey Cups, 2019, 2021. Zach Collaros was dealing with head issues. Everyone knows how sensitive those are in football. If Zach Collaros started playing with the Argos in 2019, we all know that team, they were 4-14. If they threw him in there, the same year that Zach Collaros won the Cup, Zach Collaros may not be playing right now because he may have hurt his head even further. Winnipeg kept him clean, allowed him to play. Hindsight is always like, oh yeah, we should have kept Collaros. The thing is with McLeod Bethel Thompson, under Ryan Dinwiddie, he is 18-8. Under Trestman and Chamberlain, he was 6-15. There's a very big difference MBT working with Ryan Dinwiddie, and you can see in the stats. And I think that's what people got to realize is Ryan Dinwiddie was a hell of a quarterback at Boise State. We all remember him getting thrown in the Grey Cup in 2007 because Kevin Glenn broke his arm in the East Final. Dinwiddie didn't have the greatest game. The next year, nobody remembers his opening game against Calgary where he threw 450 yards and outshone Henry Burris. Ryan Dinwiddie knows the game of football. He knows the quarterback position. And MBT is a student of the game. He's played on 10 different teams in 4 different leagues. He is 34 years old going to his first championship, ready for a Grey Cup. But he's done it because he's with Dinwiddie. And I think the fan base at times has been hard on both of them. And after your team has been 8-28 for 2 seasons, and then they go back-to-back division titles, I'm starting to question the fan base and what their expectations really are because that is damn
Well, I
impressive.
think their interpretations might be a little questionable.
Yeah,
that might be questionable.
But the last 2 Grey Cups Toronto has won has been by Ricky Ray, a Sacramento State product. Where's MBT from? Sacramento State.
Same school.
Yeah, another Sacramento State leading Toronto to a Grey Cup. It sounds good to me.
Yeah, and yesterday he alluded to the fact that it was great watching the Argos win a Grey Cup from the sidelines, but now he wants to be a part of it on the field. If you remember, David,
Yeah.
That was something he pointed out. So he's motivated, and if there's nothing that describes this Argo team more than someone like McLeod Bethel Thompson, he's the tonic that they need. He's the guy. He's the Timex watch that keeps on ticking after taking a licking, and not physically because this guy is a bull. he's seen. And I should knock on wood now because you don't want to talk about how impervious to injury he is, but he is pretty impervious to injury, and he's taken some hellacious hits, in his time here with the Argos. Before the compliments that you laid, Marcus, about the offensive line because they've improved, so he's paid his dues, to
Yeah.
be the leader of this team. And those other guys on the sideline or on the field with him have seen what he's gone through, have heard what's been said. And I think that builds a camaraderie a pretty strong bond.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. No, they when you see a quarterback willing to take those hits, do what it takes to win, the players all it just it's they feed off of it, right? They sure some of them would like to see their quarterback not, dive head first when he's running with the football, right? But they appreciate the fact that he's willing to do what it takes to win. Because that's all they want to do. That's all they care about is who's going to win in the end.
Don't you think a part of the problem is there's some of the bias of people against McLeod Bethel Thompson is because he's an old fashioned quarterback, stand in the pocket, not
Well,
run
he's not a
much.
flashy name. I think that's really what it is, right? He's not Bully by Mitchell. He's not Zach Collaros. He's not Ricky Ray. Like he had to take over for Ricky Ray. You're not going to win a lot of fans over because he like for that very reason. I think he's not the Nathan Rourke that we saw in BC. Right when you see the flashy young quarterback, it's like everyone wants the flashy toy. They don't appreciate at times what is right in front of them. I think McLeod did a good job. He heard the criticism. He knows the criticism's there, and that's the measure of a true professional is not letting it define him. He was pretty blunt when he was talking to us about it after the game, but in saying it and acknowledging he knew he was making it known that yeah, he heard it. He just wasn't going to let it define him.
And go into those names. You say Ray and Kalaros. Chad Kelly. That's another name. That's a big name. Nephew of a NFL Hall of Famer, a guy who was absolutely lights out at Ole Miss. Everyone knows Chad Kelly has a talent. How many times when people are sitting at BMO this year, when McLeod goes 2-0 a couple drives, you hear put in Kelly, where's Kelly, where's Kelly? And I give both quarterbacks credit because Kelly didn't let that boost his head and make it a controversy. Like I said, that young man has come in here and he's been polar opposite to what everyone's heard about him. He has embraced this team. He's embraced the city. Watching that play with Daniels yesterday, that just made me think, you know what, Chad, that was your moment right there. You got that touchdown in the East Final. You're not taking over NBT spotlight, but you're there and everyone knows you're there and everyone loves you. I think Chad Kelly can be a great quarterback in this league. Whether it's going to be with the Argos or somebody else, he definitely has the tools. But MBT knows that. MBT was the backup, not only to Ricky Ray. They brought James Franklin. They had to let Chris
That's one of the
Venzel.
names you're talking about that Dinwiddie turned his back on.
Yeah, because Chris Venzel, he got let go because they had to pay Franklin.
Yep.
And we saw how that turned out. And then they brought in Arbuckle. They brought in these quarterbacks saying, MBT's not our guy. And before the beginning of this year,
And
didn't we
Nichols
say this is
too.
the face of our franchise?
And Nichols too.
And Nichols, yeah, but Nichols never really played because of the pandemic. So
Absolutely.
Nichols kind of got swapped over for Arbuckle. But yeah, it's crazy to think, and I think people should be celebrating this guy more than anything because it's a testament to life. And I always use sports as an analogy for life. This guy has been through everything, and his resiliency and his resolve has brought him to this moment. And it's going to be minus 15 next week in Regina. This guy is gonna from Southern California is gonna have to go out there and try and win a Grey Cup in, I'll use your word, hellacious conditions.
Well, his Mexican roots are going to be challenged.
Well, Salvadorian
The El
roots.
Salvadoran, you're right.
Salvadorian roots.
Yeah, it's going to be challenged. I got to say though, it's funny, but I think part of it also is that the heart that Pinball Clemens has and that he injects into the franchise, into that locker room. He's brought in players who need some work. who, you talk about Kelly, you talk about, I don't want to get into the specifics, but generally speaking, Kelly came here and a lot of people said, why would you want to have that guy? That guy hasn't been in football for so long. He had some issues, yada, yada, yada. Banks has his problems, and we're finding out that Edwards has a few of his problems. Yet within the team format, it's almost as if this team takes in people who are a little bit broken to bring them in as sort of an understanding of what it takes to win and what it means to be a brother. And I really believe in that locker room, being a brother is relevant and a tool and a potential help for building a team.
100%. And one of my big disappointments with MLSE and with the operation is you have a very, very marketable team. You have guys that could really relate to people's everyday lives in Toronto and the surrounding area, an area that has 6.8 million people. This is where I'm disappointed, because there are so many storylines that could actually make people feel, you know what, I'm connected with that, and to start to follow that because of it. The 1971 team, if anyone knows history, they were such a eclectic bunch when the world was shifting, and it was going from those 50s, 60s days to a new era. But these guys fit in with the city, and that's why everybody loved them. And I think in 2022, we talk about Brandon Banks doing therapy, overcoming things. We have a lot of issues that we deal with in our own lives. Athletes are making stupid money, and people are seeing it, and they're getting turned off. These guys are making not as much as they should, but they're making money to play something. And I think people could really relate with these individuals. And I honestly believe MLSE and their marketing staff has dropped the ball big time on this group, because they deserve to be a lot more celebrated than they have been. But I do know the people who are celebrating them are the salt of the earth and some of the greatest fans in any sport.
I think the problem, and I don't want to dig into MLSC because that's not the game. That's not what we're here for. But just to touch on that, one thing that they're not, I don't think they're built for, is building an organization, is building a team, and building, a reputation. They're pretty much management more than they are builders when it comes to building an organization. It's been a real tough road for them to hoe. I mean, David and I had a conversation prior to being on the program earlier today, and we were talking about the crew cuts, David.
Oh, well,
Right?
yeah,
All of a sudden, the Leafs are direct connection to the Toronto Argonauts.
yeah, being able to provide some sort of connection outside of the Argos organization, like realizing that you can't promote this team through other channels because there are those available. The only way you're going to get other people to realize what the Argos are about is if you bring it to them, if you show them. So yeah, they tried to do that yesterday for sure.
And as we're talking about the Grey Cup, maybe we should transition to an organization that is doing it right, and that is Wade Miller and what he's done with the Blue Bombers and what the Blue Bombers are. That team deserves all the credit. What they've done in the front office, what they've done on the field, what they've done in the community. This is a team that deserves to be in this game. I would say this is a team that even deserves to be a dynasty because they've been that good. That's something that people don't realize enough. You brought a guy like Adam Bighill, who was dominant in BC, got the shorthand in New Orleans. I honestly think he should have been down there, but he has found himself a home in Winnipeg. He works at an investment company. He's in the city. People love him. Jeff Coe, Jefferson, these guys have just embraced Winnipeg because Winnipeg has embraced them. You go around Winnipeg, they know who the team is. And I think their popularity right now is higher than the Jets, which is saying something, because the NHL is a huge thing in Canada.
So Jefferson himself was dragging the flag around the field after the victory. The pride that he shows in Winnipeg and being Winnipeg Blue Bomber is amazing. And they brought Andrew Harris too, along with Big Hill from
Yeah.
BC. They've done what we've talked about with the Argos. They've brought in veterans that understand what it takes to win and understand how to deal with the issues, as I said earlier, that come up from time to time, that could give problems to a team, but they know how to handle it because they've handled it before or they've seen how it's handled. So yeah, Winnipeg has done a great job in their community, and winning back-to-back championships is no small feat. And here they are on the precipice, while we're talking about the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, of being a three-peat team, which is, we have to go back to Edmonton in the 80s to talk
Mhm.
about this kind of great team, right, David?
Yeah, I was on the Ticats radio network, and they asked me whether dynasties are good for the CFL, and we were like, well, they're good for the CFL in that you recognize good team building and being able to keep guys together, because that's something that we've wanted CFL teams to do, is not have these one and done contracts all the time. But at the same time, you also want to make sure that other teams are getting to that, like, realize that they got to get to that level as well. So you don't want to have Winnipeg going off to the Grey Cup for like 5 or 6 straight seasons. But at the same time, they're setting a standard, and I think that's something that this league needs, is teams that are willing to set the standard that other teams now have to realize we got to elevate our game to get to their level. We have to be willing to take chances as well. And I think Willie Jefferson, you may not, like, when they won the first Grey Cup, he was courted by Toronto, he was courted by Hamilton, not just with money, but they were like, the Argos brought him to a Raptors game, and it's like, the, you're going to be living in the big city, and we could try to market around you. And he's decided, no, I think I'm going to go back to Winnipeg, win a second Grey Cup, and now he has a chance to win his third straight. So it shows the culture that the Blue Bombers have built, that guys will leave the potential for it to do better for themselves individually in order to maintain that team success.
Real quick, I think it's important that there be dynasties. I think it's important there be really good teams because of the reasons you stated. I agree 100%. They give a roadmap on how to create great teams, but also that giant target that ends up on them that every team gets to fire at. One of the biggest and most interesting paths in this season was who's going to beat Winnipeg.
Yeah, that's it, right? I thought the best chance was the BC Lions, because they were, looked like they were doing things the right way. They had this good quarterback, good defense, and all those things. But it also shows that it takes time to get there, right? BC, this is really their first year of having this type of team. Give this team another year, then I think you're going to start seeing Winnipeg's going to have a tougher time. Like, this was a tough season for them. They had a good record, but this was not they did not breeze by this season. There were a couple games for sure, but for the most part, this was a very tough year for Winnipeg, and I think it's going to be a very competitive game in this Grey Cup, because teams want to knock off the dynasty. They want to make sure that the dynasty doesn't continue.
Let's go back to what Marcus was talking about at the beginning, the Willette Harris combination. um, you know, um, in this kind of game, it doesn't look like there's going to be snow. But if there's snow, one thing we do know about the cold, the running game market is imperative and important.
Yeah, and this is what we saw from Oliveira yesterday. Brady had an amazing game, and it almost
150
justified why
plus yards. Yeah.
Winnipeg said to Andrew, you know what, Andrew, we loved you here, we love you, but we're gonna go with our guy. We can't pay you that amount. It sucks because Andrew's been a great individual for Winnipeg. He's from Winnipeg.
Yep.
It justified their decision, and good teams do that. Good teams are able to say, you know what, it's time to move on. Where teams who are trying to hold on to something, they start holding on to pieces that maybe, you know what, we can't bring up other guys who deserve the opportunity. One thing I'll tell you about Winnipeg, and this is what happened yesterday, is they heard all week about this amazing Canadian kid. The next one, they were anointing him like Doug Flutie, and I love Nathan Rourke. I think he's a great story. I think he's a great quarterback. I could not imagine the numbers he would have put up if he didn't get injured. But at the same time, it was a slap in the face to Winnipeg because all people were talking about all week was BC. And Winnipeg's like, we're the two-time defending champion. You're coming into our house, and all we hear is about this kid. And I think that's where you see when we talked about veterans, Winnipeg is laced with veterans. And if you're going to talk all about the other team, they're just going to sit back and be like, go ahead. We're going to be the ones winning that game. And they showed you what they're about.
What did we say about veterans? They know problems when they see them coming. They know how to deal with them. They also know how to turn, let's just say, stuff into chalkboard
Yeah.
information, right? They know how to do that. Motivation is the key in football. It's probably one of the most important aspects of the game is motivation, being motivated. Well, we've got two teams here, and I'm glad you wanted to talk about Winnipeg. I'm glad we're talking about Winnipeg. The other thing about Winnipeg that's important to remember is that this is a team. When we talk about letting Harris go, it's because of the realities of this new millennium and this new sports thing called capology. You know, it's easy to say. Fans don't have a cap to deal with. They just talk about anybody could put together the best team in the Canadian Football League. They just wouldn't be able to put them together because the cap wouldn't allow it. And that's where the general managers earn their money in the Canadian Football League. And these two teams right now have been masters of the cap. The players that they've brought in, you just talk about Harris, who went from Winnipeg, where they couldn't afford to pay him, where in Toronto they're paying him. Now, remember, by paying him, they're not paying somebody else that money. So, Willette is a perfect example of how the cap should work, which is you have a great player, and then you have to have players that are going to be great. And you're not paying them great money yet, but they are great. The Argos have had a lot of players like that. I look at a young receiver, a Canadian receiver, who's
And
had an incredible year, right? He's not getting paid what he should get paid, and that's what you're looking for, and that's the kind of management that has to happen, and that's been Winnipeg's key. The reality is, it's not, and you said it right, Marcus, and I'm glad you said it because it's 100% true. The tough decisions are the ones that are the hardest to make, and the ones that seem to be the ones that are the hardest to sell on fans. And sometimes I think management teams worry too much about what the fans are saying. The Argos and Winnipeg are two teams that have proven that what we say, what fans say or reporters say, is very irrelevant. You've made that point in this program, Marcus, and I know David, you agree with that too. You
I'll
guys
go on top
heard
of
that
that
one.
because Winnipeg lost Kenny Lawler, Nick. They lost. They lost so many players over the years from their championship teams, and they find a new guy to bring in, Dalton Schoen. Brady Oliveira, who was the understudy to Andrew Harris. Like these guys, Winnipeg was just like, we'll find them because we believe in what we're building. We believe in the coaching staff to get these guys ready, right? And that's the great thing about and I'll bring the New England Patriots into this because a lot of what the Patriots have done, I think, is a lot what the Blue Bombers are doing. In that, there's a key group of guys you want to keep around, and there's other guys you're like, you know what, when it's time, we know when it's time to cut loose, and they did that, and they do it to perfection, and they do it in a way that it's not going to harm exactly what the team is trying to do because they know that they can find the replacements needed. And so I think that's why Winnipeg has been able to keep it going as long as they have because they know there's a science. It's math, but there's also science involved in it as well, right? And so that's what makes Winnipeg impressive is that it's not easy to keep these teams together in the CFL. You brought that up. The salary cap makes it difficult, but the salary cap also in some ways forces other teams to pay more for these players because they're coming from a championship team, and it limits how they can build around these star players that they're bringing in as well. So it all balances out in the end when you're building teams and trying to compete for a championship.
Well, David, we've only got a few seconds left, so I'm going to leave that your last word. Marcus, you get 15 seconds, the Grey Cup and what to look forward to. Key
Just
point.
look forward to a Canadian event like no other. We're here to celebrate this game. We're here to celebrate our country. And you got two very talented football teams going at each other. East versus West. I don't care about what everyone says about one division. We're coming at it East versus West. Let's go East.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we got an extra minute now, so I'll say I'll say this. I'm going to the game. I'm anticipating a lot of excitement, and the one thing that I really believe in my heart, we had 4 quarterbacks in the East and West finals. And the biggest thing I complained about to David is all year, beginning of this year, we need to have elite quarterbacks. Without elite quarterbacks, the Canadian Football League is almost meaningless because 3 downs is hard to get a first down in 3 downs. That's 2 downs you got. And I have to say, I think that's been the best foursome of quarterbacks I've seen in this situation in a very long time. How do you feel about it, Marcus?
100%. I think the league has some quality quarterbacks, and we saw that this weekend. Let's embrace it. Let's stop looking at all the negative. Let's celebrate these individuals who applied their trade their whole lives. That's how I look at it.
Final word to you, David.
No, I think this weekend was an important stepping stone for the league to have 2 entertaining games, 4 teams that deserve to be in the positions they were in, and 2 teams that deserve to be in the Grey Cup. There's no one doubting, the quality of team in this year's Grey Cup. There weren't in the past years, but I think this year especially, you saw the quality on the field, and that's what the CFL really needs to celebrate. I'm glad you said that, Marcus.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt to have great Eastern teams in the playoffs, which is what we witnessed this year after a few years where it's been questionable at best. Marcus, thank you for doing this.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Nice seeing you again, Dave.
Nice always.
Great work, bud.
Thank you.
And of course, David, always a pleasure to have you on as we do.
Yes, don't have too much fun in Regina without me, okay?
I'm going to have a lot of fun. So for David Morassutti and Marcus Aurelius Nielsen, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk, airing live Mondays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network for CFL Talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer. Please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next time.
All right.